Over the last 13 years, the rebooted Planet of the Apes franchise has produced 4 films, all of which have been met with critical praise, audience love, massive love from fans of the franchise, and box office success. And yet, these films have still managed to never be as widely appreciated and discussed as the other big-name franchises that we have today. I wanted to give my thoughts on the matter and pose the question, is Planet of the Apes the most underrated movie franchise that we have today? If you like what I do here and want to show your support, be sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things Apes. Enjoy the video. Hey everybody, and welcome to Ape Nation, your #1 source for all things Planet of the Apes on YouTube. My name is Josh, and today I wanted to discuss something that I've felt for a while, and by a while I mean pretty much the last decade, and that is exactly what I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Is Planet of the Apes the most underrated franchise today? I ask this question because I think it's a totally valid take, one that both diehard Planet of the Apes fans and general film fans alike have stated more and more over the years, and is a question that I ultimately have to say, yes, it 100% is the most underrated franchise out there right now, and it has been for a very long time. Now, I know what many of you are probably thinking, yeah, of course, you're gonna say that, you run a Planet of the Apes YouTube channel, and that is totally fair. Still, I have a few points I wanted to make in my case as to why I personally feel this way. Now, before I start, I want to reiterate that I'm specifically talking about the 4 most recent Planet of the Apes movies. This would be Rise, Dawn, War, and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the movies that came out between 2011 and this past summer. And I wanted to talk specifically about those movies in comparison to the Hollywood fare that has come out in the same period of time over the last decade or so. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is the audience and the critical reception that these movies have consistently gotten versus some of the other big, more popular, higher grossing, more in-demand franchises that we have out there, and maybe get into why maybe that is the case and why the popularity isn't as high on these movies despite arguably higher quality, or at least perceived higher quality. And I'm going to base a lot of this off of Rotten Tomatoes scores. There are other aggregator sites. You have things like Letterboxd, you have things like IMDb, you have things like CinemaScore, Metacritic, and the list goes on. But Rotten Tomatoes is the one that is most widely known to people. It is the one that is most used by critics. It is the one most used by audiences. It's also the one that is used and relied on by studios the most, for better and for worse, arguably. But that is the one I'm going to use. So if you don't like Rotten Tomatoes, I'm sorry, but that's just how I'm going to be going into this part of the discussion. But when you look at the Rotten Tomatoes scores, you have Rise with an 82% critic score and a 77% audience score, Dawn with a 91% critic score and an 88% audience score, War with a 94% critic score and an 84% audience score, and then you finally have Kingdom with an 80% critic score and a 77% audience score. And when you look at it all combined, critically, they average out about 87% and 82% for critics and audiences respectively. And you look at other franchises out there, the franchises that are really running Hollywood right now, and then look at where they all collectively score and how they've overall been received by critics and audiences. And while many of them include at least a few, if not many, high-scoring movies that are well regarded, and in the case of several, even really beloved, most of these franchises also include at least 1 or 2, if not a decent handful of films that haven't fared as well with the viewers, whether it be critics, audiences, or in several instances, both. I'm not trying to talk bad on any of these franchises. I love actually a handful of these, and I love a lot of the movies that have come out of these franchises, but I just wanted to look at some of them because you can talk about all these other franchises and go, yeah, there's a lot of movies in there that aren't great, that just don't compare to all 4 of these movies, or at least the top 2 or 3 of them. And these franchises would be things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I'm a big fan of for the most part. You have, of course, the Star Wars franchise, whether it be the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, the modern movies with the sequels and the spin-offs and the TV shows and everything. You have Transformers, you have Fast and Furious, you have the DC Extended Universe, which isn't really a thing anymore, but still, that was a thing for the last decade. You have the Jurassic series, which averages about $1 billion per movie, or something like the Monsterverse with Godzilla and King Kong. These are all some of the most popular franchises, and there's tons of others that I left out, but these are just kind of the big dogs, the ones that are like in the top 10, top 15 highest grossing franchises out there. And I wanted to bring these into the equation because, and this is is obviously just my subjective opinion, so if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. But when you look at just the consistency and quality of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or the Star Wars franchise, or the Transformers franchise, or Fast and Furious, or Jurassic, or DC, or a lot of these other big franchises, it doesn't compare to Planet of the Apes to me. And I think the same can be said for a lot of people. And you could argue maybe you prefer the overall universe of Marvel, or Star Wars, or DC, or whatever, but when it comes to just quality in filmmaking, quality in storytelling, perceived by the critics and audiences, the numbers don't really lie, at least in my opinion. And I think that that is a discussion worth having when we want to ask the question, why are these Planet of the Apes movies not as popular as some of these other movies? And I have some theories on that, and I have some questions about that, and I want to get into in just a minute. And I bring all this up because when you look at the charts, Planet of the Apes is the 30th, not the 10th, not the 20th, not even the 25th, but the 30th highest grossing franchise worldwide. And that's not even limiting the franchise to the modern movies that I'm talking about here. Not including the original movies or the 2001 remake would knock the franchise down even further on that chart. And of course, at the end of the day, I'm not seeing any of this money. I don't care about how much money a movie makes, really, but I do like seeing the movies that I care about and the franchises that I'm most passionate about be successful. And of course, being in the top 30 highest grossing franchises of all time is nothing to complain about, but still, I think being number 30 for a franchise of this quality and of this caliber, I just think it deserves to be higher. I think it deserves to have a bit more success overall. And it's my opinion that these movies should be more commonly talked about in the online movie spaces, and the Caesar trilogy especially should be in the discussion of all-time great trilogies up there with Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, much more than it currently is, and that all four of these movies deserve a bigger spot at the table in the world of film discourse. I think it deserves to be put at least in consideration and in the conversation of being on that same pedestal as something like the MCU or Star Wars. Often I hear people say that the biggest reasoning for this not being the case is that Planet of the Apes is just too niche of a franchise. It's not as widely accessible as something like Transformers or Marvel or Fast and Furious, etc. And I don't really get it, because when you look at these movies, all four of them touch on universal themes. All of them have easy to root for characters that the filmmakers make you care about. All of them have better visual effects and CGI than the majority of blockbusters out there today over the last decade plus, especially in the era of audiences more and more calling out bad CGI. We've seen a lot of that in the last few years. All four movies also tell easily accessible stories that anybody can understand and enjoy. And the other thing is, you can watch each movie without having seen the last one. I think you can watch Dawn of the Planet of the Apes without seeing Rise. You can watch War without seeing Rise and Dawn. And you can absolutely watch Kingdom without seeing the first three movies. And so I think it's very easily accessible for people to watch these movies no matter where they come from or what their background with the franchise is. And really what it comes down to is I want to know, what is it about talking apes that keeps people away? Because ultimately that seems like the only real factor here and what makes it so niche, because you have all these other factors that it shares with a lot of other big franchises and executes them as well, if not better than them, and yet it's talking apes that keeps people away. And I just don't understand, what is it about that that's so hard for people to get behind? What is it about talking apes, talking chimps, talking gorillas being the focus of movies that they aren't into? If you're someone who's watching this video who isn't into Planet of the Apes, but you're just curious as to what I'm talking about, I want to know, what is it about talking apes that has made you hesitant to watch these movies? Or if any of you guys that watch my videos know people that won't watch these movies, ask your friends, ask your family that haven't watched these movies because it's about talking apes. Why is that so hard to wrap your head around? Why is that so hard for some people just to be interested in? And why is it so hard for people to take even somewhat seriously? So that's something I really want to know when you look at all the themes and all the factors in these movies that I just push back on when people say this is a niche franchise, that's why it doesn't do as well. And I just don't understand why it's such a niche franchise. Maybe on paper I kind of get it just because it is about talking apes, but when you look at everything else that goes into it, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Something that also just doesn't really make sense, and it's never really made sense to me, is the way these movies get appreciated and get treated when they do come out. Like I said, they're more consistent in quality than any other franchise. Every single one has managed to be, if not loved, at least very well liked by the majority of people that watch it. Obviously, it's easier to do that when it's just one movie at a time every few years, as opposed to one movie a year or one movie every other year, but still, the consistency is a major factor. Audiences always seem excited to go see these movies. They ultimately legitimately do well at the box office. They draw at least a mild, if not really big crowd, especially with something like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which was a massive blockbuster when it came out. And again, people always seem to come away satisfied. And so it just doesn't add up to me. What can be done to change this? Why does it have that kind of isolated success, but it's not more widespread? Why doesn't it carry over more? Why isn't it more in the discussion all the time? And maybe that could be just chalked up to the fact that there isn't something going on in the franchise at all times. That's definitely a factor, and I'm curious as to what can be done to change that. And that leads me to my overall question here, is that what can be done to bring in more viewers or convince skeptics of this franchise? What is it going to take for Planet of the Apes to be as commonly talked about and appreciated by film fans as the other big franchises that are out there? Is it more human characters, which is something that I personally don't necessarily want, but in the right context and with the right execution, I'm open to? Is it more star power? Of course, with the original movie, you had Charlton Heston. With the Tim Burton movie, you had Mark Wahlberg. In Rise of the Planet of the Apes, you had James Franco. So I'm curious if maybe that's something that could be added to the mix in the future, more star power, or is it something like more interconnectivity, more embracing the kind of cinematic universe nature of franchises today, which is something that I personally do not want at all, but I know that a lot of people love that stuff. I know that that's what makes a lot of people excited to go see a new movie, is how it's going to connect to the next one, how it ties into this last one we saw, what's it going to tease, and what's it going to set up for the next movie. And so I'm curious if that's something they could lean into more, and if they did, is there a way they could do it without going so far into it that it starts to not feel like Planet of the Apes? Those are all questions that I wonder, are these the things that are necessary to bring in more viewers? Are these the things that are needed to convince people that haven't given these movies a chance to give them a chance? Would it boost the franchise from one that does well and consistently puts out great movies to all of that plus much larger popularity? I don't know. Would it improve the movies in any way? I personally don't necessarily think so, but would it at the very least get more people on board to give them a chance? Maybe. But with all of this being said, even assuming the films continue to be as good as they've been and do as well as they have, do I think the franchise will ever be put on the same level in terms of popularity as the big franchises? Honestly, despite the fact that I think it should, despite the fact that I think it deserves it, no, I don't. I don't think it's very likely. But going against everything I've said in this video, really, at the end of the day, does it even matter? No. As long as these movies continue to be good, I'm perfectly fine with them being rated wherever they are. As long as they retain that level of quality, as long as they retain that consistency, keep giving us great characters, keep telling great stories every single time, keep up with the stellar visual effects, keep up with the incredible world building that they've managed to do over these 4 movies, and if they manage to just knock it out of the park every single time like they have been, then no, it doesn't matter. And in a way, it's almost a good thing that they've been so underrated, because as much as I would love for these movies to be as widely beloved and discussed as the latest billion-dollar blockbuster, them being kept in this box that they've stayed in has resulted in 4 of my favorite franchise movies to come out of the 21st century. And really, that's all I could ask for, and that's all I really care about. But I want to know what all of you guys think. Do you think that the Planet of the Apes franchise is underrated? Do you think it deserves to be more popular? Do you think it deserves to be more widely embraced by movie-going audiences? Not to say that there aren't tons of people that love them. Of course, they all do well, and of course, they're all very well reviewed by critics and audiences, and it would be nice to see them be a bit more widely embraced and do a little bit better in that regard. But like I said, I don't think it really matters, and I want to know if you think it matters at all, or if you really just care about the movies that they've been making. Do you think they've been great? And if you think they've been great, you want to just keep doing what they're doing. So I want to know what you all have to say down in the comments below. Thank you so much for checking out today's video here on Ape Nation. If you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. I'll catch you in the next one, so until then, goodbye.